Ladies and gentlemen, unseasonable and record cold temperatures descended across China and into South Korea during April, causing immense devastation to crops that we're only now beginning to appreciate. Here's a report out of China where the damage was so severe that locals were actually taking into the stores and loading up on grains as fast as they could get their hands on it. Take a look.
Central China's Henan province is the country's top wheat-producing province. Its annual yield accounts for more than 25% of China's wheat production. Recently, social media users in Anyang County of Henan Province notified one another that the local wheat production has seen a significant drop. Locals rushed to grocery stores to hoard grains. A cold snap in April could be one of the adverse conditions resulting in the drop of wheat production.
Could be one of the factors, yeah, those sub-zero temperatures and covered with snow as recently as April 10th. The harvest this year will suffer from the freezing cold. Absolutely. But this wasn't just some Chinese freak. These cold temperatures extended into South Korea, where we can read that crops have suffered the lowest and the most damage from these sub-zero temperatures in the last decade. It's estimated from the article that the amount of damage to the crops this year is over 18,000 hectares. Here you see some of the sub-zero temperatures that they enjoyed. And the damage this year is more than twice the damage last year and even worse than in 2018, which was the worst in the previous decade. In this regard, quote, "There are voices of concern that cold damage to crops is becoming an annual thing, a regular occurrence. This is because low temperature damage has occurred every year since 2018, and the magnitude of the damage is considerable and increasing." Ladies and gentlemen, this is the shifting of the growing seasons and growing zones so that these people are no longer able to grow what they have been growing for the last 100-odd years during strong solar activity when we enjoyed relatively stable growing seasons. As you know, we're now in a deep solar minimum, which means we have a shrinking growing season, and fundamentally the growing zones themselves are shifting. We're now just at the very forefront of solar cycle 25, which by NASA's own expectations is going to also be a diminutive one. In other words, we're going to continue in this trend of echoing the activity during the Dalton minimum, when we saw tons of crop losses, terrible winters, and famine as a result of these things. And so you can see these growing zones. We've seen this happening around the world. You remember this headline from Italy and Spain, where they were calling out that there was frost damage in what was considered a formerly safe growing area. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't put this in any clearer words, and in fact we quantified it when we looked at the growing degree days, iceagefarmer.com/GDD. Ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves in the midst of the most aggressive and holistic onslaught of attacks against humanity and liberty that was ever conceived, and it is no surprise then that this, a new strategy deployed by the European Commission this week in the midst of a global pandemic, it's described as a FarmToFork strategy for a fair, healthy, and environmentally friendly food system. Well, that sounds pleasant enough, but make no mistake, what this actually is a weapon, a salvo, a multiple warhead MIRV deployed across modern agriculture and our food supply, and indeed, our ability to feed our families going forward. We need to understand what this is. We need to know its genesis, that it goes line by line down the agenda items enumerated in the UN IPCC's land use report of yesteryear. The UN, all they can do, as described in that document, all we can do is make suggestions to policymakers. It is up to you to go get this done in your countries. So who better than the European Commission, who has no accountability to anyone? There's no voters that put them there. So thanks to the EU, we can just use this group of dictatorial people to enact, to implement those suggestions from the land use report. And ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what they've done. And not only that, but they have codified now how they will force the rest of the world to play with them by these same rules. So this is, as I said, the rolling out of all of those things, insects as food, no meat, no private ownership of farms, all of these things that the UN has been openly talking about, but lacks the teeth to actually implement, are now being codified here in FarmToFork strategy from the European Commission. Let's take it apart a little bit just so we can get a picture of what I'm talking about here today. So this was the 20th of May,